What is up, Nick fans? I'm Ryan from Fireside Knicks. I'm joined by my friend, co-host, and the guy you all know, Dylan Backer. Dylan, we are here to discuss NBA free agency kicking off tomorrow. Now, the New York Knicks do not have a ton of cap space, and they will not be the key buyers in this year's free agent class. It's not like this is a team that's going to spend like crazy, go out and drop $100 million contracts or even $20 million contracts in this free agency class, but there are a bevy of veterans who they might be able to sign with the mid-level exception. There are a bevy of veteran minimum caliber players who could go to the Knicks. New York is not necessarily looking for the fifth piece in a starting lineup in free agency, but they are looking for a way to round out the bench. So, Dylan, with the Knicks about to hit free agency, with the free agency about to open up tomorrow, what are some of the things you are looking for or anticipating ahead of tomorrow? And how are you doing today, my man?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the free agency and stuff like that, the first thing that I really have been emphasizing the need to look for, and I'm going to say it again on here, shooting. You need to get some shooting. You need playmaking as well. You definitely need that, but I definitely think you need to add some shooting. I felt like the bench last season just did not score enough. They didn't provide enough scoring really whatsoever. You kind of felt like that those guys came in and just, they did their job, but it wasn't exactly what we wanted out of the bench. They didn't really provide enough relief for the starters. So when I look at what I want in free agency, I want to get guys that can shoot. A guy that immediately comes to mind, Luke Kennard. That is like one of the top targets. And even Al Horford is another top target. I know it sounds cliche to say he's top target because he's like almost 40 years old or something like that. But Al Horford would provide an impact. He still provides some rim protection. He can still shoot the ball. He does a lot of things well on the court that the Knicks need. He fills a lot of needs for that. But, circling back to Kennard a little bit, this is a guy who's one of the better shooters really in the league and has been for the past several years now. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, he shot like close to 44% from downtown this past season, which is just an absurd mark. That's ridiculous. And this is a guy who puts up a lot of threes as well. That's not exactly on like low volume or anything like that. So this is a guy who, could immediately come off the bench and just provide a bunch of shots, kind of like fill in that Dante DiVincenzo role a little bit, a guy who just comes in the game and just shoots the ball. Obviously DiVincenzo ended up becoming a starter at some point, and Luke Kennard would have the potential to do the same thing. This guy's been around for a while as well, and it's not like he's some like rookie or second year player or whatever, or a guy who hasn't really proven much. No, he's proven that he can shoot the ball, and he's been that way for pretty much his entire NBA career. He's my top target. But if they want to go a little lower, go for guys that they can definitely afford because, admittingly, if they want to get like someone like Luke Kennard, they might need to make a trade to open up some room. If they don't want to do that, if they want to be able to just go like at the mid-level exception, there's definitely a bunch of other smaller name free agents out there, which we will get into. There's also trade targets you can go after too. I know, like, for example, Dennis Schroeder is a free agent. I wonder how much he will cost. I can't imagine he would cost too much because he's someone who's bounced around quite a bit at this point in his career. Malcolm Brogdon is also a free agent. That is someone they can definitely pursue for the mid-level exception, I think. Now, a main target a dream target recently, not even recently, today, Malik Beasley. We all found out what happened with Malik Beasley kind of getting the he's being investigated for gambling. I don't think the Knicks were ever going to end up signing him, but now I think it's safe to rule him out as even a thought just because of what's going on with that situation. Obviously, we can't assume anything because it is an active investigation. We don't know what's going to happen with that. But from what I did see earlier today, the Pistons were preparing to offer him an extension, and they've put that on pause. And I would assume every other team who was going after him is also pausing their negotiations for him. So that's certainly a huge development, and it definitely has a ripple effect on the rest of free agency as well, since Malik Beasley was one of the top coveted free agents in this year's class. So looking ahead with that, I would imagine some of these other guys are going to be, they're going to have more competition now. There's going to be more competition for some of these other guys. So, even if the Knicks weren't going to necessarily go after Beasley, it definitely has an impact on the rest of it and how the Knicks are going to be able to approach it. But Ryan, what I want to ask you is, you've heard many times what my main priority is this summer, in free agency with shooting. But what is your biggest priority when it comes to, a certain area or even a certain player? What is like the absolute must that you think the Knicks need to do this summer?
Yeah, so for me, it starts with shooting, as you mentioned, and I also believe that defense is something the Knicks need to try and improve this offseason. A player I wrote about earlier this morning who, may not fall under the mid-level exception. He may get a little bit more, but there's a chance he might end up in that situation. That is Al Horford. Al Horford is someone who there are some concerns. Number one, age. That's the primary concern, right? And I think it's more than a fair concern. But I did note that he started more games this year and played more minutes per game this year than he did in 2024 when or 2023 when the Celtics won the championship. NBA years are weird to me. I guess it's 2024 that they won the championship, even though the season started in 2023. Point is, Al Horford was asked to do way more this year than he was last year in terms of minute share. And in the postseason, he was also asked to do a lot. Now, he didn't go on as deep of a playoff run, but with the New York Knicks, Karl-Anthony Towns, he is going to have days where he's hurt. Like, he's going to have days where he's not going to be able to play. He's not going to play 82 games next year, but you would have Ariel Hukporti who can play for you off the bench. He just, as Dylan wrote about earlier today, or not earlier today, more like half an hour ago, that Ariel Hukporti's club option at $1.9 million was picked up. Horford is a really good shooter still for the center position, more of a league average shooter relative to the rest of the league. But the thing that kind of stood out to me, Dylan, 94th percentile in rim deterrence, 70th percentile in rim protection. So again, really good at deflecting people from the rim. You can run some lineups where you have Brunson out there with Horford out there. When you sub out Cat, you can have lineups where if you're going to split up the Brunson Cat minutes a little bit to just kind of give them a little more space to operate and be the number one for a little. Horford is a great pairing alongside Brunson. And in a similar vein, McBride was a brilliant pairing alongside Cat because McBride was a very strong defender. So I think that kind of system where when one of those two players are off the court, the player that they're getting replaced with at that position, coupled with the other star there, the fit is seamless. The fit is perfect. And at the end of the day, I think we'd be in a spot where, you just have really a strong foundation for a lineup. And also, Dylan, you could do things like, hey, we're facing off against a team that's a little more physical, a team that may not be a great matchup for Cat. Let's have Al Horford have more minutes alongside the starters. It gives you a little more versatility. Hart and Horford's ability to both come off the bench and start are very versatile and valuable. And it does not look like the Knicks are going to have a massive shakeup to their starting lineup based on kind of what we've seen early on in the offseason and just kind of the overall lack of rumors. Although I'm sure we'll get to this in the show because Yankees Country mentions this. Fireside Knicks, huge fan of the Fireside channels. We're getting Braun. Dylan, I have to ask because I don't know if you saw the video. You saw, you know what? You probably did see the video. I wouldn't be mad at looking at New York. Dylan, what do you think about LeBron James and all that stuff? What are your thoughts there? I need to know what you think. I need to know what you think. I have to ask.
Man,
I was waiting to ask all day.
I am one of the biggest LeBron James fans that there are to know. Okay, I've been someone who has said that he is the GOAT over Michael Jordan and all this stuff, and I'm sure a lot of people my age would agree with that. But either way, I don't think that there's a realistic scenario where LeBron James does come to the Knicks, and I want to explain why. It's just because I don't think the Knicks are necessarily interested themselves in bringing in a 41-year-old star. Now, I understand this is LeBron James. We all know his legacy and his resume. I don't need to get into all of that. We all know what it is. And we all know LeBron also wanted to sign with the Knicks back in 2010 when he was a free agent, and then he made the infamous decision with Miami and all that stuff because I guess his wife didn't want to go to New York. I don't know. It's a bunch of stuff like that we always hear about the Knicks every year, that a star wanted to come here, but it didn't work out. We all hear this stuff. But when we look at LeBron here in this situation today, he picked up that option. It was like $52 million or something like that. Extremely expensive option. I mean, that is a lot of money, and a lot of people were comparing it to how Jalen Brunson took the pay cut and all that stuff. I hate when people compare things to Jalen Brunson because Jalen Brunson's situation is extremely unique. You never see that situation. I guarantee you 9 out of 10 players who would have been in LeBron's situation, matter of fact, maybe even 10 out of 10 players in LeBron's situation would have taken that option with that much money on the table. But either way, when it comes to saying because I seen the videos and stuff that you mentioned, and I did see, people were saying, oh, he could end up getting traded because, he's still kind of wondering about what the outlook of the Lakers roster is going to look like. And he's not really sure exactly if that team is ready to compete for a championship, which again, that is a completely fair criticism or, critique or whatever you want to call it, evaluation, if we want to call it that. That is definitely fair to make that kind of evaluation with LeBron. and the Lakers, of course, as well. But with all that being said about in terms of him coming to the Knicks, I don't see it happening. I think it's mostly just Knicks fans kind of being like, "Hey, let's go get LeBron because it looks like he might be available now." And you know what? I think a lot of Knicks fans would be happy if they brought in LeBron. But again, the price that it would cost to get him, this would be a big trade for LeBron. It would be probably very similar to the Kevin Durant package for the Houston Rockets. Now, again, I know that package in comparison seems like nothing because the Rockets, in essence, gave up not even their best player, and they gave up a guy who was inconsistent. The Knicks don't exactly have that same kind of resource, though. The Knicks also have very few assets that they can, in fact, move. You know what I mean? So when you look at like a LeBron trade, you're looking at probably OG Anunoby gone, and possibly even Karl Anthony Towns gone as well. You're looking at some very important pieces that would be thrown on the table. And if I'm the Knicks, I'm not sure if I want to shorten the title window like that. I'm not saying LeBron is someone who can't give them a championship. No, he absolutely can. But he is like 41 years old. There is definitely a concern about whether or not a 41-year-old star can lead a team to a title. I mean, he look at this past year. I understand the Lakers had a bunch of flaws this past year. They didn't have a center. They had that botched trade with Mark Williams and all that stuff. They were running Jackson Hayes out there. I know their situation was weird, but they still had LeBron James and Luka Doncic out there on the floor together. And the Minnesota Timberwolves kind of embarrassed them in the first round. Now, I understand Austin Reeves was pretty bad in the first round as well, and that kind of contributed. But aside from the point, you have two superstars right there sharing the floor together that pretty much everyone deemed unstoppable the moment that they saw them start playing together. And they clearly it's clear that they can be beat. You know what I mean? And it makes me wonder if Jalen Brunson and LeBron would be the same way. You know what I mean? Obviously, Jalen Brunson and Luka Doncic are two completely different players. Luka Doncic is better than Jalen Brunson. We all know that, but we know that they're both kind of superstars. We would put them in that type of tier at this point. But what I'm trying to say is I don't think bringing in LeBron right now is exactly a decision that needs to be made. I feel like it would be more of an irrational and hasty decision to do. I don't think they need to do that. I don't. I mean, I didn't want them to go after Kevin Durant. So if you don't want them to go after 37-year-old KD, why would you want them to go after 41-year-old LeBron? That's kind of the way I see it a little bit. Maybe it sounds a little cliche or whatever, but I personally don't see a bunch of logic in going after it when you have this opportunity right now to win a title with the team you have. I understand there may be an argument to say, oh well, if the East is this wide open, why not just go all in, right? I think the Knicks already did that. I think they did that last summer. They went all in. They have a team right now that has shown that they can compete for a title. I mean, they should have beat the Indiana Pacers. I'm crediting them because, I mean, they played well as a collective, but the Knicks had more talent than the Pacers. I think everyone can agree with that. The Knicks had two superstars on their team, and they had two better, of the best wing defenders in the league. The system just did not work for the Knicks under Tom Thibodeau. That was the biggest issue. That's why they canned him in the first place. So looking at the team the way it is right now, it definitely can compete for a title. In fact, I think the Knicks should come out of the East right now. I think where we stand right now, I think the Knicks are the favorite to come out of the East. Matter of fact, I think they should come out of the East and they should represent the Eastern Conference in the NBA Finals. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say they will win the NBA Finals because, one, I don't know who we would match up with in the West. I don't know if OKC is going to be this same powerhouse that they just were this past year and then they won the title. So I'll hold off on my thoughts for that. But in terms of adding LeBron, I don't think it's necessary. I want to hear what you got to say though, because LeBron is LeBron. We all know about this guy. So when you hear LeBron coming to New York, it's immediately sounding great, right? But I think there is logical issues with doing that, and I want to hear what you got to say about that.
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind with me and any LeBron James conversation is the one very enticing thing about acquiring LeBron James is that, I mean, there's multiple, but the one of the things that kind of stand out to me is the flexibility you gain because he's probably only going to be here for 1 year. So knowing that means, number one, his price can't be too high on the market. And number two, you're going to be opening up $50 million in cap space. Now, as you noted, does that hurt your ability to win right now? Because if you trade for LeBron James, you either have to trade Cat's salary and trade for LeBron and do a 1-for-1 and then go out and get a center. Because I'm going to be honest, I don't think I can trust Mitchell Robinson to be my full-time starting center, play every game, be healthy. Like, you have to have Mitch and then an insurance plan for Mitch, which means basically getting another starter. It's like you have to find your next Isaiah Hartenstein. And that's very hard to do in this market. The other situation is you trade like an OG Anunoby alongside another player. Although you'd have to trade Anunoby another player and then probably get another player from the Lakers. So that just and you're probably going to be adding pick compensation. So from a realistic standpoint, I don't know how that's feasible unless you're just trading Cat for LeBron. That's the easiest path to do it. And I would say if you're the Lakers, you just, as you mentioned, watched Luka Doncic and LeBron James and Austin Reeves all try to fit together defensively, and it didn't look great. I don't know if bringing in Karl Anthony Towns to play with Luka Doncic, I'm kind of laughing. I'm laughing even saying it. I don't know if that's necessarily the route you want to go, right? Like that doesn't seem like the right way to, I guess, counter that, or I don't know if that's really a solution. I guess Cat, he's tall, he's big, he's a center. Like I get that, but I don't know if that's going to solve their problems. Again, it depends on what LeBron wants. And I do think what LeBron wants is going to play a huge role in where he goes. If he wants to stay, then yeah, he'll stay. If he wants the Knicks, he's probably going to end up a Knick if the Knicks want him. But I think that huge portion of do the Knicks want LeBron James, you have to have the conversation because it's LeBron James. You just do. And I will say the fit with Brunson and LeBron, I think it would be better than Luka and LeBron because the Lakers didn't have anything outside of those two really defensively. They had DFS, Dorian Finney-Smith, but they didn't have size. Like they didn't have any rim protection at all or rim deterrence. You see the Knicks have rim deterrence. They didn't have rim protection. Lakers didn't have either, right? Like they didn't have either. So I think that hurts them a lot. Also, not having a full season of Luka and LeBron. It does also make me wonder if you're LeBron James, not wanting a full year, like not wanting to figure out a full year with Luka Doncic as your co-star kind of feels nuts to me. I don't know what you think, but for me at least, I'm like, you don't want to at least see what that looks like? I would love to see what that looks like if I'm LeBron.
I would love to.
From an NBA standpoint, like an NBA fan standpoint, I'd be kind of disappointed to know that those two never got a full off season to mesh with each other. I mean, look, I think it's like a less than 5% chance. I'm gonna put, because I don't really know. I think the one thing that I don't really know is if that LeBron video of him saying what he said about New York is him talking about the Knicks. Even he could be talking about moving there after he's done. The other variable in this is, Dylan, do you have to trade for Bronny James? Like, you think is LeBron going to leave his kid in LA?
Could you imagine could you imagine if the Knicks had LeBron James, Bronny James, and then Jalen Brunson and Rick Brunson all together on the same
dude?
staff?
That they would be the Nepo Knicks. The Nepo Knicks. It's an all-time. That's an.
I mean, it just sounds weird to me. I don't know. It just doesn't. It doesn't. I don't know. It sounds like a one of those like weird Twitter scenarios where they're throwing things out there and they're like, "Oh, this could be the case." When I really don't think that's happening. I mean, it would be such a weird look. I mean, I don't know. I
think it's going to be like, again, I think this offseason will be adding depth and then maybe trading Mitch. I think Mitch might be the best player the Knicks trade this summer, excuse me.
It could be Josh Hart too.
Yeah, Josh Hart. I think do you think it's either or, or do you think it's both? Because I think it's either or. Personally,
I think it's either or. I think the only way those two were to get packaged together is if it was for like a star player, like a superstar /
and that can't be player. LeBron because the money doesn't match up. Yeah,
no, exactly. It wouldn't be LeBron, and KD's off the market, and we all know Giannis is likely not to get moved. So
and they all make too much money to make that even work. You have to add more.
Exactly.
Not that you're letting money stop you from getting Giannis, but you'd have to. The thing with LeBron that concerns me is that if you're not trading, like the ideal situation for the Knicks, in my opinion, is you trade Cat for LeBron because then you get off Cat's contract, then you free up that $50 million. You didn't trade OG, you didn't trade Mikal, you didn't trade.
The big risk I'll say you take with doing that is it definitely shortens your title window though, because now you're looking at, instead of a 2 to 3 year window that you currently have, you're looking at win this year or none. Or never.
What I will say,
you're taking a risk.
It is a risk for sure, but there's also the it does. You do have $50 million? Like you do just have $50 million to do whatever you want with. Like I think that is, it's not that it's going to make you inherently better, but there's a window to still contend if you operate the right way. But as you mentioned, there is risk in that.
It's just a matter of if that window you still have to contend, and if you add those pieces, like are those pieces you're going to add with that money going to move the needle, kind of
And
make
are
you
the
that
players you're
same
targeting
title
even be
contender that you
available?
were.
You can't. This is not a league where
Exactly,
you can just
because
look at the free agents and go, all of them are going to hit free agency. That usually is not how it goes. When's the last big,
no.
like, truly massive, game-changing free agent? Who's the last one to hit the market? Is James Harden the best free agent of the last, like, 4 years?
Something like that. I mean,
James
you
Harden?
don't really
Paul
see
George?
you don't always it probably was Paul George this past year, but we all know how much of a fall off he took. So, to
Yeah.
any Knicks fans last summer who were saying to go after Paul George, thank God we dodged that bullet, and thank God we did not listen to you guys. You know what
I
I
mean,
mean? But,
look at the most expensive players who could hit the market. Damian Lillard has a player option. LeBron, if in this scenario you acquire LeBron, he's probably retiring then. Kevin Durant is going to be UFA. He's not. There's no shot Houston doesn't at least figure out a way to extend him, right?
I think they're already working on that,
And he'd
actually.
be 38.
I think Houston's already working on like a 2-year extension with KD. If they didn't already do it, I think they're already like working on it. So
James Harden just signed an extension.
You
Yeah,
can pretty much assume KD.
Harden signed. I guess Luka would be a free agent, but again, that's banking on the Los Angeles Lakers, who just got a brand new owner, who's also the Dodgers owner, who has so much money, is going to just let Luka walk. I think that's crazy. I think that's insane.
Two franchises let Luka walk, then we're going to start having some real discussions about Luka.
It's just that's just one. I mean, it's not the same thing, but you would just be like Juan Soto got traded 2 times.
At that point, you'd have to question a lot of things about Luka if two franchises were to let him go. You know what I mean?
I also seriously doubt he's going to hate being.
This is not just some decent player.
Yeah. Now, shifting gears, because I know the LeBron stuff is. Look, I don't want to spend the entire live stream talking about LeBron, and I didn't want to. I know that I'm a big LeBron guy too, and like I have tweeted. I tweeted this out today.
At the end of the day, it's all smoke.
Yeah. I tweeted out today that I would give up my ability to have kids for LeBron James to be a Knick. So, I think people know how I lean right now. But
oh my
again,
goodness, Ryan.
I think it would take everything breaking the Knicks way and the Knicks front office and the Lakers front office basically saying, we'll do whatever is most favorable for the Knicks to end up with LeBron, which is just crazy for that to happen. But Dylan, one target we have talked about a lot, who may not be LeBron James, but is maybe he's the LeBron James of bench shooters. Luke Kennard. Luke Kennard is someone who could also be a mid-level exception target, might be able to fit the Knicks free agent kind of game plan here. We spoke about him extensively. Why do you think Luke Kennard be a great fit for the Knicks outside of just like, hey, he's cheap? Like, what are some of the things that fans should be looking out for with Luke Kennard and why he could be a big fit for us?
Because the guy can shoot. It's that simple. I mean, like I said before in the opening, he shot like 44% from 3 last season, and he's close to over 40% for his career. And he's been in the NBA for quite some time now. This isn't like someone who's just started to emerge in the league. No, he's been around for some time, and he's always been like this. He's also someone who moves around a lot off the ball, which I don't think the Knicks had enough of last season. Now, I know you could probably look at Tom Thibodeau's scheme as a big reason why, but I also don't think like Landry Shamet exactly kind of fit that mold that we were really wanting. I mean, he did his part. I'm not gonna act like he didn't do his part. He did what he was supposed to do, but it felt like when you sign or acquire a shooter or a shooter as Shamet is tabbed to be, you would expect them to come in the game and kind of just let that thing fly, right? It didn't really happen with Shamet until the very end of the year, and then Tom Thibodeau didn't really use him anyway in the playoffs. Obviously, we're going to have a different head coach, and we don't know who that head coach is going to be just yet, but looking ahead of who it might be, it seems like it's heading in the direction of either Taylor Jenkins or Mike Brown at this point, because those two guys are headed for a second round of interviews, which, I'm very much in favor of both those guys. I would prefer Taylor Jenkins, but wouldn't be upset if it was Mike Brown. But looking either aside from that, whoever it's going to be, I fully expect them to use Kennard, and I want them to use Kennard to its strength, which means get that guy on the floor and have him shoot. You know what I mean? Get some plays for him to get open looks from 3. Look what Dante DiVincenzo, when he was on the Knicks and he was out there shooting the ball lights out, they were setting up plays for him to get some clean looks from 3. The Knicks won a lot of games because of that. Even with all the injuries, Dante DiVincenzo being out there, being a threat from outside, having teams have to focus on him, it helped the Knicks win a lot more games, because not only did he perform well, but because he's a threat out there and teams have to focus on him, it makes the other guys perform well too. Look at Josh Hart when he was in the starting five or whenever he was out there with the starters. Teams threw their center on him. Teams threw their center on Hart and had that center play back because Josh Hart wasn't even looking at the basket. He wasn't trying to score. There's nothing wrong with, taking a back seat on the scoring front once in a while, but you also need to make yourself a threat. You have to give opposing defenses a reason to guard you because when they're not guarding you, it's essentially 4-on-5 on offense, right? So having like Luke Kennard out there, whether it's as a starter or whether it's off the bench, whatever role it would be, just having him out there, being someone who we all know is a threat from outside, a guy that like I said, teams have to guard him because he is someone who's going to shoot it if he's open. Matter of fact, he'll shoot it from anywhere as well. I did a lot of tape. I looked at a lot of tape on him. You know what I mean? So when you have someone like that, a willing shooter, that would be a huge plus for the Knicks. It really would. It would help the Knicks scoring numbers jump up a bunch. The Knicks offense in the first half of the year was a really good offense, right? But the less and less that we saw the bench, and the more that we saw the starters, the more tape that the opposing teams got on these starters and how they performed together. And because those starters were also getting tired all the time, nothing was happening, right? The offense at times, especially in the postseason, looked stagnant. They didn't really have any 3-point shooting. They were like a bottom 5 3-point shooting team in the second half of the year. They didn't take enough threes. They weren't really scoring at will. They were kind of like getting the struggle buckets a little bit. You know what I mean? They weren't passing the ball either. Having someone like Kennard, a guy who can move off the ball, get open in any which way, would be such a huge plus. That's why I think he'd be a great fit. I don't know how likely it'll be that they'll sign him because I do expect him to have some competition, especially with the Malik Beasley news, which I mentioned at the beginning. I expect Luke Kennard to now be a lot more sought after since the seemingly top shooter in the free agent market seems like he might not be signed anymore. So that's really where I stand on it. I want to get your input on that, though.
Yeah, you make a great point about the interest level in Luke Kennard potentially being higher. That's going to serve to hurt the Knicks because, again, they can't just outbid teams. They are not going to be able to say, hey, we'll offer you way more than anyone else offering you. Just come here. It's not going to happen. And if you're Luke Kennard, again, I said this about any free agent. Your desire, your right as an NBA free agent is to sign with whoever you want for whatever contract is out there and offered to you. If your desire is to simply get the most money possible, that is within your right. And I am going to fully support that. I will never sit here and disparage a player for taking more money. So if that ends up being the case, oh well. It does. You do make good points, though, about Luke Kennard and his ability to impact shooting wise. And you can bet on him to shoot over 40%. Shout out Malik Beasley. You can bet on that. And ultimately, with where Detroit was at, based on that Shams report, they were right on the cusp of signing this guy. 3 years, $42 million was the reported deal. And that's going to fall apart. I also do wonder, even if he's cleared in this investigation, I wonder how that affects his market. I also wonder if that affects his market in a positive way for a team like the Knicks. I'm just saying, if he's cleared, because it isn't like it's both. Let me clarify. It is morally irreprehensible to bet on your own teams and to bet in NBA games and affect your performance based on the bets you've placed. But if he's cleared of it, like it's not like a situation where like you could be rumored to do it and then the FBI can't find you doing it and you hit it really well and they just investigated and they found nothing. If they don't find anything, you're fine probably. I do wonder if that again went because he's probably not going to be able to, or teams are not going to feel comfortable signing him until maybe weeks after this clears up. And at that point, everyone's cap space is going to be filled up. Maybe a team ends up picking him up for cheap, but I will say
and by then too, teams might have already signed someone else, thinking like, okay, well, it looks like we can't go get Beasley anymore, so let's go get this guy instead because he doesn't have any crazy allegation going against him right now. So
it's the beauty of NBA free agency, in the beauty and the pain of it, which is that timing matters. You cannot like sitting around the market for a while. You're just jeopardizing your dollar unless you're a true superstar, a LeBron kind of player. Well, teams will hold up their free agency for you, and even then, these types of players tend to try and do a lot of that recruiting beforehand so that team can have enough cap space to do other things. Because while the player is not going to take a pay cut in most cases, they do want to make sure they're on a contender. And what you run the risk of doing by sitting out there for a very long time. Now, Dylan, another player who has kind of popped up, and it was he said this is not a report technically. He put this out there. Dennis Schroeder said Detroit doesn't really want him. They don't want him
Yeah.
back. I understand why. You have Jaden Ivey, you have Cade Cunningham. You were looking to re-sign Malik Beasley at that point in time. Your backcourt was looking to be very promising. If they continue to show really no interest in bringing him back, I think Dennis Schroeder would make a lot of sense for the Knicks because he's immediately the best bench scorer they have, like instantly, without a shadow of a doubt. And I was kind of surprised looking at his defensive numbers. It's not that he's a great defensive player. Most guards aren't, but he's not that bad. He's not, this god awful, ruin your season kind of defender. He's the kind of defender that if he was put next to Jalen Brunson for spurts, not for an entire game, like for a few minutes at a time, your defense could be fine depending on how you align things. Now, I would ideally want Schroeder to be the guy who comes in place of Brunson, but you could also run some creative offensive sets. Maybe you're down a few points. Maybe you need some points. Maybe, like Hart, you just know Hart isn't there to help you generate offense. He's there to be, just this crash, high intensity, high effort guy. I love the idea of having someone who can take the ball up the court, and that isn't Jalen Brunson. He can shoot the three pretty well. His 3-point percentages at times can be very up and down. Like this past year, he shot 30% with Detroit, 32% with Golden State, and 38% with Brooklyn. So that's 34.2% on the season. The year prior, 37%. The year prior from that, 32.9%. The year from that, 34%. He's not an elite shooter, but he's a solid shooter. He's a good enough shooter. He's an aggressive scorer when he needs to be. He's a good playmaker. I would, if he's willing to sign for a mid-level exception or for a cheap enough contract, that's another player who, like, if you're New York and he's out there and he's saying, yeah, I'll sign with you guys. I don't really, I'm just trying to win at this point. I think there's a lot of upside there. And again, I'd love to see the idea of the Knicks having a team that's capable of, again, putting someone else out there that isn't Jalen Brunson to shot create and not shot create, excuse me, take the ball up the court and also shot create. But there are other players on this team who I think can do it.
Yeah, and I would love Dennis Schroeder on the Knicks. I'm not gonna lie to you. We've talked about it before briefly, but I think Dennis Schroeder would be a great fit for the reasons you outlined. The ball handling, the shooting, just the overall the way that he kind of helps the team kind of flow offensively. I think that'd be great. The Knicks didn't really have that kind of guy off the bench last season. I mean, Deuce McBride was essentially the sixth man for the Knicks this past year, and he wasn't like awful as a sixth man. I'm not making a slight on Deuce whatsoever, but I think we can all agree by now that he's more of a shooting guard, right? He's not exactly someone who you can exactly rely on to run the offense. This is someone who will play the two guard really well or kind of play off the ball. Because 9 times out of 10, when he was out there was a secondary ball handler out there, whether it was Jalen Brunson or Mikal Bridges being that person. So there was never really a time where you felt like Deuce had to run point guard. And I don't think that should be the case. I think Deuce needs to be playing alongside a guy who can set him up for good looks and catch and shoots and spot ups and things like that. Because that's where I think Deuce excels. You know what I mean? So looking ahead with Schroeder and stuff like that, I did see that thing that you mentioned that Detroit saying that they didn't really want him because that's what Schroeder said himself, that Detroit's not really pushing for him, which, again, it makes sense. I mean, Schroeder did, he kind of was being that annoying pest that we had to deal with during the playoffs because for whatever reason he was just going off. But, this is a guy who's been a good player. This isn't like someone who's like a complete bum. You know what I mean? Dennis Schroeder's been around for quite some time now. He's obviously spent a lot of his time with Atlanta, and then he was with OKC briefly, and a bunch of teams at this point. He's been with so many different teams over the past couple years. It even blows my mind that he spent basically 1 month with the Golden State Warriors this past year. That still blows my mind. I feel like a lot of people probably forgot about that stint, right? So, even looking ahead if he's going to end up with the Knicks or not, again, I don't know how likely it'll be. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's exactly impossible. I also don't think Dennis Schroeder would cost a ton of money on the market either. He never really has cost a bunch of money ever since he, infamously fumbled $80 million from the Lakers. So, I think we can all agree that was a terrible financial decision on his part. He's lucky that he's still in the league and that he's still thriving, but he's not making money as much as he could be making. And he's also bouncing around teams now. You hate to see that, right? You really hate to see that. But if Dennis Schroeder came to the Knicks, I think it would be on a pretty cheap deal. It wouldn't be league minimum. He's not, Cameron Payne level, but he's definitely like it should not cost you much more than like 3 to 4 million, maybe even 5 million. It really should not cost you money to bring in Dennis Schroeder at this point in his career. He's an older vet. He's kind of a guy who doesn't he provides a decent amount on the offensive side, but he doesn't provide like mind-blowing numbers or anything like that. He obviously upped his value quite a bit in Brooklyn, but then that kind of went down a little bit when he was in Golden State, and then he kind of was just there in Detroit. He played well in the playoffs for Detroit, but he didn't do a whole bunch for them in the regular season, or at least in the end of the regular season. I honestly even forgot he was even on the Pistons until we were in the playoffs against them. So, just looking at that stuff like that, I mean, I think Schroeder would be a great fit. I do. I think he's one of my top targets, honestly, alongside Kennard and Al Horford. There's a bunch of other targets out there. There's even trade targets that we can talk about as well, because there's many different routes that the Knicks can go, and we really don't know what direction they're going to take. Because for all we know, they could end up doing absolutely nothing and running it back. Now, I don't think they should run it back. I do think they need to make some additions in some areas, whether that is through the free agent market or the trade market. I think they need to make some changes. If they run back the exact same 15 guys that were here last season, I don't know how I'd feel about that. You know what I mean? I think you need to take advantage of the Eastern Conference being much more open now than it was just a couple months ago. Halliburton's injured for Indiana, so they're not going to be as good, or at least I wouldn't expect them to be as good. Tatum is out for the Celtics, and the Celtics have already started trading away some of their guys, so they're clearly kind of in a retool/rebuild year a little bit. You know what I mean? Damian Lillard has got an Achilles injury as well in Milwaukee, and we all know how murky that situation is right now with Giannis and all that. So I don't really look at them as a serious threat. The main teams I'm looking at as threats to the Knicks are Cleveland again. I mean, we just saw Cleveland pull off a one-on-one trade for Lonzo Ball, which that's remarkable. But, the Knicks unfortunately didn't have like an asset to where they could be able to do that themselves. As much as I would have loved Lonzo Ball's fit on this team, we all know he's got the injury problems and all that stuff. So it would have been a huge risk. I'll admit that. But looking at like teams that threats to the Knicks in the East. You got Cleveland, you got Orlando, who pulled off the Desmond Bain trade. Detroit's probably a threat too. I don't think Detroit is going to be like a threat for the top spot, but they're definitely going to be a playoff team again. I would like to think, if they can keep most of those guys. Obviously, the Malik Beasley situation kind of throws a wrench in some things. So if they can if they have to replace him, if they can find a proper replacement for Malik Beasley, then they'll be a competitive team in the East. I know people have been looking at Philly as well, because Philly will get their three guys back healthy, and they just drafted VJ Edgecombe. I don't think Philly is going to be as good as people say. I think Philly is looking like at best a fifth or a sixth seeded team. I think they're more likely headed for the play-in, just because of where Paul George is at this stage of his career, and also Joel Embiid's injury history seems to really be stacking up on him as well. So that's an interesting situation in Philly. They could either end up being really good and those guys stay healthy all year, or they can end up being where they were this year, where it just all comes crashing down because of injuries and stuff like that. So that's really where I stand. I mean, it's going to be an interesting summer. I really think that they have so many different ways to go about this, and we're going to find out a lot tomorrow when free agency does begin, where the Knicks are going to be standing. Are the Knicks going to be aggressive? Are they going to be out there looking to sign a bunch of different guys and make some moves, or are they going to be rather quiet? Maybe make a couple small signings here and there, but not really do much else. That's really where it is, and that's really all I got to say about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I totally overlooked some of the comments here because I thought one of these would be kind of interesting to talk about because of, I think we both agree. For the most part, there isn't a massive shakeup that feels like it's about to happen. There doesn't feel like the Knicks are on the precipice of, all right, we're going to trade. We're just going to blow up the starting lineup, trying to rearrange it, kind of like what they did last year. So I don't believe the New York Knicks are going to be trading Karl-Anthony Towns unless the right situation opens up. So number one, the Knicks, look, this contract isn't an albatross. It isn't. But it is a lot of money. There are only so many teams in the NBA who can afford this kind of contract because of the second apron. And there's only so many players that you can match the salary for. You either have to get a group of clearly not as good players who aggregate into that salary, or you have to trade for another player making as much as he does. And the players making as much as Cat does are really, 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 really good and are likely not going anywhere. So, no, I don't believe Cat will get moved. And again, as Dylan mentioned, the East being open does not mean that the Knicks should sit back and do nothing. But I also think it means that, hey, you got to try and build this team to be good. You do not want to have next year be an adjustment year, a year where you're figuring out a bunch of new pieces, a year where, Jalen Brunson's got to get comfortable with a new second star. I think there is more to be had with this Cat Brunson duo. And again, who is the center? Who is the center in the Eastern Conference that you go outside of Joel Embiid, who again, his health, cannot rely on it really. You're going to go, this guy is going to terrorize Karl-Anthony Towns when Karl-Anthony Towns is trying to play defense. I don't know if that center exists. I also don't know if that center. I also think that there are ways to mend your defensive woes while not getting rid of Cat. You can improve from Josh Hart defensively, or maybe it's a matter of scheme, or maybe it's a matter of Mikal Bridges getting better individually, or OJ Anunoby being better individually. There are ways to kind of figure out this puzzle without getting rid of Cat. I think that is a thing I strongly believe at this point in time. And I also don't believe you have to be the second or third best defensive team in the NBA to win the finals. I don't. OKC was pushed to the brink by a team that is just this piping hot offense that is running on 100 miles an hour all times. And they too, I was kind of stunned. Did you know their 3-point volume in the regular and postseason was not too dissimilar from the Knicks, but it wasn't like top of the line. It was better than the Knicks, and their percentages were better than the Knicks. But I was kind of stunned to see that like they weren't the second most frequent 3-point shooting team in the NBA this past year. There's a line between complete 3-point avoidance and taking enough attempts with really good efficiency. There's a very big difference, and spacing as well. Last year, or the year before this, I guess it's kind of difficult because now it's like I hope people know I'm referring to the Isaiah Hartenstein, Dante DiVincenzo, Julius Randle Knicks. That team in the postseason started Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, OJ Anunoby, Isaiah Hartenstein, and Dante DiVincenzo. 2 non-shooters. One guy who definitely can't shoot, and Isaiah Hartenstein, basically never shot with the Knicks his second year. And Josh Hart, who was just as bad of a shooter last year as he was this year. In fact, that was the year that Josh Hart was like, oh, it clicked back. My wrist clicked back into place. I couldn't shoot all year. I couldn't. My wrist was messed up. I couldn't shoot all year. And that team had spacing. That team did not struggle to score. In fact, Dylan, that team got their defense got their doors blown off them by the Pacers that year. Granted, injuries played a role in that. But you get my point. Like, I think a lot of the Knicks' issues were coaching. I strongly believe that. You cannot sit here and tell me spacing magically became an issue just because you lost Dante DiVincenzo. I don't buy it for a second. You didn't have a single complete non-shooter in the starting lineup, and you had a worse spacing than when you had a non-shooter in the lineup. Isaiah Hartenstein could not step beyond the 3-point line. At least Josh Hart, if he has the ball and he's wide open, he might take that 3. Isaiah Hartenstein is not taking that 3. In fact, he said we're going to be out there. You know what I mean? Like, Cat is out there. If you add someone who might be a better shooter, I'm still going to be knocking on this door. I don't know what the Mavs are doing with PJ Washington. I don't know what they're doing with their wings. They have to do something. I feel like they have to do something. I don't buy it for a second that they're not even entertaining or willing to think about those conversations. I don't buy it for a freaking second, Dylan. But there are guys out there that can provide size or can shoot or can do both. There are players out there like that. And also, I mean, it's not like Josh Hart sucks. It's like the Knicks have a bum on their hands. He's just maybe not the best fit with the starting lineup. If not, how many 6 men would you take over Josh Hart in the NBA? Like maybe
not many. Not many. I mean, it's a pretty small
like
list.
3? Maybe 4? Maybe. And if you add a shooter with him to run with McBride,
I mean, let's think of some names then. Let's think of some like 6 men that we would take over Josh Hart right now. Let's think, off the top of our heads. You got the 6th man of the year this year was Peyton Pritchard, if I'm not mistaken, right? Would we take him over Josh Hart?
I think at his job, yes, but is he going to be a 6th man this year?
That's the thing. I mean, it's a interesting situation in Boston, but assuming he's a 6th man, I'm saying, he's a 6th man,
I would take.
Would you take him over Josh Hart?
Yes,
I probably would too, just because he can score. What I want my 6th man to do is score. I don't think Josh Hart sucks at all. I think Josh Hart's a very important piece, but I don't think Josh Hart should have gotten the type of burn that he was getting this past year. There's really no reason for a guy who doesn't shoot the ball to be playing 45 minutes. There's no reason for that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. He's an energy guy. Energy guys need to be playing, about 20 to 25 minutes a night, and I think that's a fair mark for Josh Hart. He provides the rebounding. He provides some playmaking. He can score a little bit once in a while when he wants to, but he doesn't do it enough aggressively for me to really sit there and say, play that guy for 45 minutes. He doesn't do that. I'm not saying that Peyton Pritchard is like a 100% better player than Josh Hart. He might be a better player than Josh Hart, but I'm not outright saying it right here. I'm just saying in terms of like what I want out of my six man is what the type of production Pritchard provided for Boston, which was come in the game and just score, provide some scoring, provide some ball movement, make yourself a reliable threat. That stuff matters out of my bench players. I want my sixth guy to do that. That's really what I got to say about that.
Yeah, and also when we talk about Josh Hart and the NBA in general, like fit matters. Your synergy with a player, your synergy with a team, these things matter. And it's not some like, oh, like, Josh Hart's a bad guy. It's like these are quantifiable things. You need guys who can shoot around. You need guys who can shoot in your starting line. You had spacing issues. You need maybe someone who's a more of a defensive threat alongside Brunson and Cat. Or maybe someone who adds a little more size. I also don't think Hart's that bad of a defender. I just think he's the wrong kind of defender. Like he's going to get a lot of mismatches because you have to hide Brunson and Cat. And with the bench, your bench gets deeper. If you put yourself in a situation where you have Josh Hart, who could be the ball handler off the bench because he is a ball handler. Like he can do it. McBride is most likely going to be there. He's on such a cheap contract that Dylan, it would take a lot for me to think about trading him just because he's so cheap. And then, you probably have to trade Mitch if you're going to get a starter or someone who can, be a starter for you. So I'm just going to assume he's traded. Again, that's kind of why I mentioned like someone like Al Horford. If he's your eighth man, if he's your guy who's your backup center, and I feel comfortable enough with Huck Porty that if the Horford thing fails, I can have Huck Porty be my backup big and see it through to the deadline, that kind of thing. But let's say it's a Horford, you add Horford on the mid-level exception, and let's say you traded for someone who could be a starting guard for you or a wing who's a little taller than Hart. That team's deep, man. Come playoff time, you got 8 guys. You not only do they contribute to the team when they're out there. I don't feel like, oh shit, that guy's out there. Damn it, man. Like we're gonna lose these minutes. I'll feel like we're in a good spot. Maybe you have a ninth man step. Maybe a Tyler Kolek steps up this year. Although again, the fit's a little bit rough. But with that bench group, because you have Hart and you have McBride, Kolek, Horford, and then let's say you put out like Ananobi. I mean, you never really run 5 out, but depending on how you mix and match certain lineups, you might be able to put Kolek out there for some spurts. Maybe Dadiet is able to step up a little bit, although he's very young. It's going to be hard for me to imagine that he's like in the rotation. And you also might sign, like, as you mentioned, a Cameron Payne, like maybe some dude out there you can get for a vet minimum who's campaign, right? Who's going to provide campaign value or Landry Shamet value. I mean, I think Landry Shamet is one of the bigger missed opportunities from this past season. Or DeLon Wright was another kind of a decently large missed opportunity that that's why you fired Tibbs. Because you found out that in the postseason, hey, these guys can play a little bit. You went to the postseason not knowing if these guys could play. That was a big oversight. This year, you can have some rookies play more. I think there's just the regular season can be more educational for the Knicks in the postseason. Because if you have, the goal should be to have 7 to 8 players you truly can trust in the playoffs. Ideally 8. Backup big, Hart, McBride, or maybe you bring in a bench guy, and then you have Hart in the still lineup, whatever it may be. I want to have 8 guys I can trust in the playoffs, and then maybe figure out, maybe I get a vet minimum guy or a rookie to step up and be the 9th or 10th guy. That's where I'm at with that. I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to like how I want the bench designed, it's pretty much that way. I want the bench to be deep. I don't want to have, a situation where we're running an 8-man rotation during the regular season. I mean, why were we even doing that to begin with? To me, that's beyond me. I never understood why we were running such a very short rotation like that in the regular season. It doesn't make a bunch of sense to me at all. I mean, you had, like you said, this was a missed opportunity for guys like DeLon Wright, Tyler Kolek, even Landry Shamet, even Ariel Hukporti, and even Pacome Dadier. You had missed opportunities because, at the early part of the year, you could have tried some of these guys out for some time. And obviously, Shamet was injured. But, aside from like Shamet, of course, you could have tried some of these guys out for some time and really see what you get out of them, right? And Tom Thibodeau did not play them really that often during the regular season. He gave him a couple spurts here and there, but that was about it. He only played him like a handful of games. You didn't really see him that often. He didn't really give him time to kind of build some chemistry. He didn't do it in practice either because I think a lot of us have seen that report now where they didn't really run scrimmages in practice. They didn't practice on late game situations and all that stuff, so the players couldn't have chemistry. That stuff matters, okay? On-court chemistry matters a lot. There's a reason why the Knicks looked like at times that they had struggled to play together because they didn't have the chemistry. And it's clear why they didn't have the chemistry because the coach didn't do it. Coach didn't make sure they had the chemistry. He didn't design it correctly for them to build that chemistry, right? But as I was saying with the bench guys, you had a missed opportunity because DeLon Wright, Landry Shamet, guys like that, they provided impact in the playoffs. He brought them in during the postseason, and they provided an impact. The problem, you brought them in when you were down 2-0 already to Indiana, so you're already on the ropes, right? And secondly, you didn't play them at all, pretty much really at all, during the Detroit series or the Boston series. So therefore, right there, you have these guys cold. You guys you're expecting those guys to come in who haven't played in weeks, even months, to come in the game in the most important games of the season at that and provide an impact. That is negligence. That's not You're not looking at you're kind of just like forgetting about those guys during the season, and you're bringing them in a situation where they really don't have to be out there as much as you probably are depending on them now because the guys you were hoping would deliver are not delivering, right? If you would have had these guys ready throughout the season, put them in certain situations to get them mentally and physically ready for that kind of situation to come if their number gets called during the postseason. He didn't do that, right? He did not do that. There was the one game where he closed with Ariel Hukporti back in November. That's like one time where he actually gave a younger guy an opportunity to show something in a crucial situation, right? But more often than not, we saw Landry Shamet get pulled with like 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter, despite him hitting like 3 threes in the past 5 minutes or something like that, making an impact. You know what I mean? The guy makes an impact. He's out there, but because Tom Thibodeau ran such a very linear and rigid rotation, he had to take him out because according to his game plan before the game, it was, all right, I'm taking this guy out and I'm closing the last 8 minutes with these guys, right? So that's what I really do not want my head coach to do. I want my head coach to be able to, trust his bench. I want him to be able to bring those guys in and feel like that they can make an impact at any point throughout the year. I don't want to be, in the same situations we were this year where the playoffs come around and you really don't know what you're going to get out of the bench. You don't know if you're going to see a certain guy come in or not. You don't know if that guy does play or not. What type of impact is he going to provide? I don't want to be in a situation where I'm basically battling with myself if this guy should be playing or not. I want to feel confident about certain guys coming in and playing, certain minutes in certain situations to provide a positive impact. There's obviously, ways we can kind of work around that because if they sign certain free agents, you obviously can't leave certain guys out of the rotation. So you kind of have to plug and play some more guys. But when we're talking about the internal options that we currently have, such as guys like Kolek, Hukporti, Dadier, even Kevin McCullough, all the 4 guys we drafted last year, right? When you look at a situation like that where those guys can, they have upside. They have a potential to make an impact. But because they didn't really play last year, you kind of wonder, are they going to be able to make an impact this year? Or are these guys going to end up having to get moved because now that's basically 2 years down the drain? I mean, look at Deuce McBride, for example, when he was first up. It took the guy about 2 years to finally crack the rotation consistently. He made his NBA debut back in 2021, and he didn't crack the rotation full time until RJ Barrett and Emmanuel quickly got traded. He didn't crack the rotation until then. Last season, the 2023-24 season, was the first full season that Deuce McBride was in the rotation. It doesn't even feel that way because we feel like we've had McBride for a long time, in matter of fact, we have had McBride for a long time. We've had the guy now for 4 years, but he didn't really start playing until 2 years ago, right? So you feel like you kind of had missed opportunities there because you felt like in the year they missed the playoffs in 2022, maybe you could have been playing McBride and guys like McBride and Quentin Grimes more often because those guys were providing an impact that the rest of the guys were not providing. You know what I mean? So I want my new head coach to be able to trust his bench. That's my bottom line. I want him to be able to trust the guys he's putting out there on the floor, and I want him to use the proper lineups for proper situations. Tom Thibodeau was always closing with lineups that he knew was not working. Game 1 against Indy, we all know that game. He closed with the lineup that he knows blows defensively. He knows that lineup, that 5 right there, absolutely sucks on defense. He closed the game with them anyway, and they ended up blowing a lead because they just gave up a bunch of wide open threes. Obviously, a comeback like that is unprecedented. You don't see that really ever, right? But it happens. It can happen. It showed right there. It can happen. You know what I mean? Especially when you're facing a high-powered offense like the Indiana Pacers were this past season. They were a high-powered offense. You can never fall asleep or put your foot on the gas against them. You got to put in the guys that are making the situations work. You got to put in the right lineups for the right situation. We have access to all that data going on the NBA's website, looking at the five-man lineups and which ones work. And it's clear as day that the Knicks starting five last year played terrible together. I mean, it's just a fact. Maybe they were fine individually, but together on the court, they sucked. They were terrible together. It just did not work, right? And I would hear, yeah, I've seen a lot. I'll make my point quicker because we're creeping up on an hour on the stream, and I also want to give you an opportunity to get some more input on the free agency and stuff like that. But what I'm saying here is, we I would hear people saying like, oh, the roster construction of the Knicks is poor. This, that. They don't have a bench. This, that. They don't have good options. I get that. They have very great options. I would hear it out more though, and I would place less blame on the coach if the Knicks did not have lineups that worked. If every single five-man lineup that the Knicks ran out there had a negative net rating, had poor numbers or whatever, they were all just playing bad together, then yeah, I would blame the roster construction. I would look at Leon Rose and say that this construction you put together is not working. But the Knicks did have lineups that worked. They did. The lineups that included Deuce McBride were positive. The lineups that included Mitchell Robinson instead of Cat at the five were positive. Not saying that Cat being off the floor was a positive, but you get my point. Like using the guys in the right situations, like putting Cat at the four instead of the five, having Mitchell Robinson out there more often, having Deuce McBride be out there a little more often than you were having him out there. That stuff made an impact. The Knicks were doing good when that was the case, but Tom Thibodeau strayed away from that. He refused to do that because of his rigid rotations, and that cost him a chance to win a title this year. I will still look back on this, and considering how the NBA Finals just went, I can firmly say I think the Knicks would have had a much better chance at winning a title than we initially thought. I think a lot of people thought that we would just get absolutely spanked by OKC, and who knows? That very well could have ended up still happening. OKC is a different animal. They're a very good team, all that stuff. They obviously just won the title, so congrats to them. But they're clearly more beatable than we thought. They're clearly not this, unstoppable, five-headed monster that like the Golden State Warriors were in the mid 2010s and all that. No, they are beatable. I think the Knicks could have definitely had a chance to beat them if they were able to catch fire and have a better offensive system than when we have with Tom Thibodeau. I think the Knicks could have definitely beaten OKC. I really do. I don't think they would have done it under Tom Thibodeau, but if they had a different head coach who ran the better offensive system with the talented players that we have on the team, they definitely could have had a chance. They really could have. And I think it's a missed opportunity that we will continue to look back on until the Knicks win a title, or if they win a title. You know what I mean? That's really all I got to say. I know I went on a big tangent about that, but I think that talking about the bench is extremely important because I think that's the area that needs to be addressed the most.
Yeah, and what I will say to wrap up here for myself is that the Knicks, the biggest missed opportunity for me with the Knicks was not figuring out what they had. Not knowing what you had with your roster was just, I mean, that's fireable, and it results in a firing. And so I just saw Ian Begley an hour ago put out that the Knicks, alongside other teams, will have interest in bringing back Landry, or interest in signing Landry Shamet. Shamet would be a nice rotation piece to have back if that's your ninth best player on your roster, or even the eighth best player on your roster. I think you're in a fine spot. Again, I just want to make sure that this team, come postseason time, they don't have to be in a position where they're just playing, they got five guys and maybe a sixth guy that you're hoping is good enough. Miles McBride was your sixth guy last year, and he wasn't really that good during the regular season. He was a lot better in the postseason. I don't want to be in that spot again. I don't. And I think that, with Leon Rose, I think why that rift grew wasn't that Leon Rose hates Tibbs. I know that report came out that Leon Rose, the backing that Leon Rose had of Tibbs for a while was there. But I do think that when you build a roster and you bring in veteran minimums and you bring in vets on minimum deals, you bring in rookies and they're not playing and you don't know what they have in the regular season, and then you only find out in the final series of the year, I think that is, when you only find out what they are then, I think that's crazy. And I'm going to respond to this here. Bad take on the saying the problems the Knicks had was all on coaching. If each starter hits one more shot than they missed, they would have won that series. Players shit the bed when. Look, I'm not saying it's all on coaching, but a good enough chunk of it came from coaching that you had to change coaches.
It's a
Yes.
large reflection on the coach because I
Yeah.
want to jump in on this because I've had so many people tell me the same thing. Even my IRL friends have told me, "Oh, it's you're blaming Tibbs, but the players didn't, step up." Yeah, the players, the players are not free from criticism at all. I mean, the players didn't step up when we wanted them to do that. However, I think you can blame the coach for a lot of the reasons why they didn't step up. And the reason I say that, look at the way the offense was running. Very one-on-one, isolation heavy. Guys are not moving off the ball. Look at the defense, dropping back on defense, playing drop covers, not putting pressure on the ball handler. Those things fall on the coach. The coach is the one who's telling them to play it this way. These guys are professionals. These guys have played in the NBA for years. Most their starting five has been in the NBA now for between 7 to 10 years now. These guys are not like young guys, or well, they're young, but they're not like they're not like OKC Thunder young, where a lot of those guys have been in the league for less than 4 years and are still on their rookie contracts, right? These guys have been around for a while. They know how this stuff works by now. They know. And you can blame the players partly for not, being more assertive and stepping up on that. Yeah, sure, absolutely you can. However, when you're playing for a certain coach and you're supposed to be buying into this product, you're going to listen to what your coach is saying. And when your coach is having a different scheme that is not working and he's having you follow that scheme because he's assuring you that hey, this is the philosophy that's going to work, it's you got to look at the coach and say, well, the coach is not the one delivering. He's not the one maximizing the talent of that he's got on the floor. Look at games that like Mikal Bridges didn't take enough shots in. How many times this year did we look at Mikal Bridges' stat line and go, why did he only take 6 shots despite playing 39 minutes? Why did he only take 8 shots, but he played 35 minutes tonight? You know what I mean? You can't have that happen. You can't have that happen where one of your top scoring options is not taking enough shots. How many times this year did we look at Karl-Anthony Towns and say, why did he only attempt 2 threes tonight? Why is he only attempting this many threes in this span of games? Look at the postseason. There was a stretch where I think he made like 1 3 in 6 games, in that many games. And it's not like he was like 1 for 40. He was just not shooting threes. And when you're not getting yourself in a rhythm, and that's your strength, you're not maximizing the strength of your players. Tom Thibodeau wasn't drawing up plays for Bridges to set himself up himself or for his teammates because he is a guy who's a capable playmaker, a capable shot creator, all that stuff. He wasn't having him do that. He was instead having him sit in the corner and play spot up, and the ball would sometimes find him, right? Karl-Anthony Towns, instead of having him play at the three-point line more often and utilizing his strength, a guy who's a career 40% three-point shooter over a 10-year NBA career, instead of having him, be more in the pick and rolls or in the pick and pops, he had him play in the low post instead. Instead of running screens with Brunson, instead of doing all that, had him play in the low post and try to make something happen down there. Even though I don't think Cat is a bad finisher, we all know his strength is more on the outside part of the court where the shooting is. That is his strength. You want to take advantage of that. You have a 7-footer who is one of the best shooters in the league and is probably the best shooting big man of all time. Use that. Don't turn him into something that he isn't. And that's what I did not like about Tom Thibodeau. He was using these guys in roles that weren't meant for them. Josh Hart questioned his role during the preseason. And, obviously he brushed it over later on, but I don't think it's something we can brush over now looking back. I think that's something we can really look at and say, well, maybe he really did not know what his role was because Josh Hart was not shooting the ball whatsoever. Obviously Josh Hart was never like a big time scorer, but I don't remember him just not looking at the basket at all. I do remember a time where he was actually trying to somewhat score. So it's just weird to me. And you could even look at the rotations as well, even aside from the schemes. You can look at the rotations. Deuce McBride and Mitchell Robinson not playing enough minutes. The stuff that the discussion that me and Ryan just had about the bench and how they didn't maximize the bench. They missed an opportunity to use those guys in situations you could have used them in, right? So looking at all that, I mean, that falls on the coach. I'm sorry, that falls on the coach. I know a lot of people disagreed with the Tibbs firing, but these reasons that I've outlined, and there's many other reasons as well. It's not just the reasons I outlined, but because of some of the main reasons that I pointed out, that's why they fired him, and that's why I'm in support of the firing. I think Tom Thibodeau was a great coach in a nutshell. If you look at the 5 years that he was the head coach, great coach for us. Turned around the franchise, got us out of those horrible dark days, turned us into a competitive team, and set the foundation for us to be a title contender. That's awesome. We hit our ceiling with Tom Thibodeau, though. We hit our ceiling with him. We were never going to end up winning a title with him because the thing that holds him back is himself. It's Tom Thibodeau himself that holds him back because he's not willing to make a change. He's not willing to go out of his ways to kind of, do what's better for the team. He sticks with his philosophy and he goes with it. And I can respect him for having faith in his own game plan and being confident in it. But when it's not working and you're not open to change, it's an issue. And that's why the Knicks got rid of him. It's that simple.
Yeah, I fully agree. And to round for me at least, the last thing I'd like to throw in here, I just think the Knicks have enough talent, frontline talent. They have enough up. Like if you look at if you look at the five best players in the Knicks, take it with the five best players on any team in the NBA. They stack up very favorably. You want to look at anyone really other than OKC. I think you could argue for the Knicks starting five, healthy going to this upcoming season, over theirs. You can take it over Boston's probably easily now without Tatum. Indiana probably easily now without Halliburton. The one team you could argue for is Cleveland. The one team, because Cleveland, I think, with Lonzo Ball, if he's healthy, which he's healthy right now, that team is devastating. That team is deadly. But Dylan, I'm at the point where I feel like the Knicks have the best starting five outside of OKC, or an argument for the best starting five that isn't Oklahoma City's. And now you have a new coach, or now you're going to have a new coach. Hopefully that results in a stronger year, and hopefully this free agency class, they're able to shore up the back end of the bench. So that's really all I have to add. I know we're at an hour and 5 minutes. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's so many different discussions we can have, but to kind of wrap up this stream a little bit, they have a lot that they can do this summer. But they also at the same time don't have a lot they can do. And when I say that, I mean, the Knicks can either look for ways to add to the roster through free agency or trades, because there are ways they can do it, but they also don't have all the money in the world to just sign whoever they want. They gotta approach this cautiously. They still also have to look for a head coach. So they got a lot on their plate right now. And the head coaching search is in fact going to affect free agency. It's going to affect who they can sign and who's willing to sign here, because there might be some free agents that they really like, but they're going to go, well, you guys don't have a head coach yet. I don't know who's going to be coaching me. So I don't know if I want to sign here. So, it's going to have an effect. There's going to be a lot that can happen. Who knows? They could end up having a really quiet summer and they don't sign anybody of importance, or they don't really sign anyone that's going to play, or they don't make any trades, anything like that. I think the Knicks have used up a lot of like their blockbuster type deals over the past couple years. I think they're done with that phase now, and I think now they're just trying to kind of ensure their depth a little bit and really get that stuff processed. And I think that's really where we're at. And I think it's a good strategy. I just hope they sign the right guys. I hope they can sign some impactful players. There's definitely a lot out there that we outlined. We outlined a handful today, but there's also a bunch of others out there. Nikhil Alexander-Walker is definitely one of the candidates that I really want to be able to get into at some point, as long as he ends up, not re-signing with Minnesota or signing somewhere else. I think he'd be a great fit with the Knicks. And, as long as he's still, a free agent in the coming days, we'll probably end up making a separate video about that, because that is someone I do want to be able to discuss. But, there's other guys out there as well. Luke Cornett's a free agent. There's, Kevon Looney's a free agent. Bunch of other targets out there. And obviously not every target is the most desirable target. And unfortunately, in the free agent class this year, there aren't that many desirable targets. It's kind of a pretty bad free agent class, if you want me to be honest with you. But you got to work what you can work with. The Knicks have some talent on the roster already. They're stacked up in that regard. You got to ensure their depth, get a good head coach, and let's rock. That's really all I got to say. If there's anything else you want to add to that, Ryan, before we, finish off this stream, go for it.
No, I second everything you say, and hopefully this free agent class, the Knicks are able to clean up a little bit and get a little just get a little deeper. That's really where I'm at right now, and figure out what they're going to do with Mitch, and obviously with the head coach situation.
Yeah, it's that simple. There's so many different decisions. There's also the Bridges extension stuff going on as well, which we did make a whole video about that as well. So, you guys can check that out if you haven't already. But I do think this is a good place to finally wrap the stream up. We're about an hour in. I think this is a good spot to kind of end it right here, and we can really get into the nitty-gritty of free agency as the time goes on. It officially starts tomorrow at 6 p.m., so pretty much almost exactly 24 hours from now is when free agency does technically begin. So we very well could see some movement right then and there. Who knows if the Knicks are going to be signing anyone at the moment free agency starts, or if later on in the week they'll add some guys. I do expect something to happen. I don't expect anything crazy to happen, but I would be very shocked if they just go through this entire free agency and trade season completely silent. I think they're going to end up making some sort of moves where guys will come in and be playing a big role. But like I said, I think this is a good spot to wrap it up. So we really hope you guys did enjoy this live stream. You can leave us a like on the stream and all that stuff, and let us know what you think about all these free agents. You can hit us up on our individual Twitter accounts, which are right there above our heads, and we would love to talk with you guys about certain targets, because I think there's a lot of interesting candidates out there. You can also follow Fireside Knicks on all of our social media pages. We're on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, of course, the YouTube page that you just watched the stream on. And if you're watching on X, make sure you give us a follow on there as well. Like I said, you can follow me and Ryan's personal Twitter accounts. They're right there above our heads. And we'll see you guys later in Fireside Knicks. Peace out, and let's go Knicks.